Hello, and welcome to the Let's Talk Transformation podcasts. Today we'll be exploring human transformation, leadership, and purpose, but through the lens of art, creativity, and global impact. I am absolutely delighted to welcome Rick DellaRatta, founder of Jazz for Peace. Rick, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Susie. Excited to talk to you today.
Likewise, it's an absolute pleasure. Rick, you are a renowned jazz pianist, vocalist, and composer. You're also the founder of Jazz for Peace. Um, the title is intriguing in itself, but you've harnessed the universal language of jazz and music for me to bridge divides of all types of divides, geographical, ideological, political, cultural, and there are so many, aren't there? But also to use it to promote cooperation and supporting philanthropic causes globally. I think there's so much to say about the power of music and its links, more particularly to leadership and collective intelligence. And I mean, we could start anywhere, but being a musician myself, and as we were talking before the show, this is a subject close to my heart, and I often use my own experience with music in my work in organizations and leadership for what it can bring, what it can enable, and what it can unify. So, can we start with this idea of music, Rick, and the inner music, so to speak? And I would love for you to tell us more about your story and this quest you're on with Jazz for Peace.
One of the most important things for me was just that I really kind of lucked into being involved in something like music that has such a foundation.
Mm,
It has such a history and it goes back centuries and, probably goes back to the beginning of time. But
totally.
basically, you have this long lineage. And that's why, when I wrote the poem Jazz for Peace, I had these words in it about how, the lineage of something and all of these great people that contributed it. And so there's this, there's this great like ocean to
Mm.
just, ocean of opportunity to delve into all of these great masters that came before. And that gives me the opportunity to, utilize all of their gifts and their power and their contribution and then put mine in to try to take it forward to the next step. So I was just very lucky to that it was music that I was in, that I had chosen.
Mm. And I think, this unifying power of music across borders, but also the power of that to touch fundamental human needs, which are the same, aren't they? So it's about what makes us the same, not what makes us different. But it's, its power to foster sustainable social change. Um, you know, what do the most impactful initiatives that you've supported have in common, Rick, in terms of leadership or transformation, and in terms of what they unify?
Well, what I found is that, when I started playing music, I was literally only 6 years old. And I only realized now what I was doing then because I was trying to learn the piano on my own. I thought Santa Claus had brought something because it came on Christmas Eve. And I thought, wow, there must be a powerful reason for why this giant contraption is in our living room. And I started to learn own. And I didn't realize, but what I was doing was I was raising my human consciousness as I was playing and listening and playing and listening. And then as I started studying, I started learning it and all of that stuff and the mastery of it. And the whole thing was a series of human consciousness raising. So I was always going whoosh like this
Mm.
through a musical journey that I was on with the piano and then back down to reality. And that thing was making me realize that, hey, there's something special about this higher level of human consciousness.
Mm.
I was realizing that intuitively as a child. As life developed, I started realizing, wow, I'm always shooting myself up. I'm shooting myself up to this higher level of
Mm.
consciousness all the time through gigs, through music, through performances, through these exciting opportunities. At the same time, I realized, hey, the whole world is in on this,
Mm.
At a higher level of human consciousness, we break through barriers. We break through language barriers. And, it's the lower level of consciousness that we get caught up in. And the higher
Totally.
level of consciousness where we have the opportunity to transform your
Mm.
magic word. So
Mm.
I was noticing without realizing it that music was could break through any barrier because I was traveling around the world after time around the country, around the world, all types of people in different languages, different religions, all everything, and I saw that music was a unifier, and anything that could divide us, music could break through.
Mm,
So that's where I was at 9/11
mm,
when I witnessed that tragedy from a rooftop less than a quarter of a mile away.
wow.
And so I felt like I've never been so prepared for a tragedy in my life. I mean, someone placed me in a luxury box office to a tragedy after being more prepared than anyone I could ever think of, because I knew that we needed to bring our species together in a positive way. And I knew music could do it, but from helping over 850 of the world's most outstanding causes, I see that they are all united by one thing, and that is the transformation of raising human consciousness and
Mm,
operating at a higher level, because they're all doing that when they passionately pursue their their mission to achieve their outstanding causes. And when you see people, you travel around the world and you see all these different religions. You go to the Far East, you go to the Mid East, you go to Nepal, you go to Pakistan. You see people that have different religions, but I noticed the same. I noticed that same thread. All of these religions are doing the same thing, trying to get people to raise their level of human consciousness. So now, with technology, I have a lot of good news for this planet.
which is brilliant because we're in need of it. But
Yes.
also, we're back to the unifying factor of what keeps us the same and this higher consciousness. So, what people call in yoga the higher mind, but this whole idea of stepping away from the lower consciousness, which is driven by ego, and up into the higher consciousness, which is more collective. And for me, the shift that's happening today from a leadership perspective within society as well is from ego to eco. So stepping out of this lower mind, lower conscious, and stepping up into something bigger, more universal. And you spoke about creative intelligence, which we're all born with, and that as a child you were very aware of. And I think it's really interesting, Rick, that you bring that back to us. And it's interesting what it means for the leadership paradigm, which, leadership meaning the way I lead myself, the way I lead my teams, the way I lead my family, my society, leadership as a concept. But particularly in organizations in the industrial era, it was sort of power over in a more hierarchical, rigid structure to power with in this more distributed sort of collective sense. And I know music has both those, doesn't it? It can be very structured and hard to learn and very frustrating, personal experience. Getting the notes right, understanding where you need to transpose, what it means, how you do it, almost like maths. And then you have this liberating, sort of more creative side of music. So bringing those together for me is what's so powerful. So, what does leadership mean to you as an artist? Rick, because I think today we're more connected than ever before by tech, as you say, but we're more disconnected than we have ever been on a human level. And this is where what you're doing is so powerful for me. So, can you tell us a little bit about what being a leader, which for me, you are leading this, what does it mean for you, Rick?
Well, a good idea if you are a leader and if you want to be a leader, or if you're going to become a leader, irrelevant, a good idea in leadership is to have an answer. I mean, that's a really good idea if you can pull it off. Unfortunately for me, I've been helping over 850 of the world's most outstanding causes around the world for nearly 25 years. And as we get closer to that 25-year anniversary of the very first Jazz for Peace concert, which would be next year, I see more and more people like you, more and
Mm,
more enlightened people are catching on and like, hey, wait, I feel some energy over there on at that apartment in Times Square. Let me find out what that is. Let's find out what's going on in there. And they pipe into my living room here. But basically, one thing that I've discovered, luckily, from a lot of people now listening, from listening to a lot of people like you and like many
mm,
others, I
mm,
found out that we are in a transformation. And
mm,
the reason that you pointed out issues with our leaders and issues with other things is because we are going from an old style to a new opportunity that's going to include everybody if we do this right, if we embrace this.
Mm.
And why are we able to do this? Well, we can do it because of advances in technology. See, there is an old paradigm, and when you look at oligarchy, and which we're in now, we're in
Yeah.
oligarchy. So that's why you have egos. I mean, if you go back to the writings of Aristotle, he
Mm.
explained exactly where we are now and exactly what's going to happen, and exactly, I mean, he knows all the answers. He can literally tell us about today and even about tomorrow with his observations on oligarchy. But that's again part of an old guard that was necessary because we didn't have the tools to make the transformation that we're going to make now. And I'll give you an example. Uh, I would call it the billionaire syndrome. Okay. I
Okay.
didn't get the memo. So I'm an example of hopefully the transformation. But if you talk to a billionaire, and I've seen interviews of them, they will say a very similar thing. They say, listen, how did I become a billionaire? Well, I decide, don't go after your passions in life. You'll end up broke and homeless. Find something that's profitable and
Mm.
become passionate about that. This is literally what they say, okay? Now,
Okay.
that's how they did it, and that's what's probably necessary, and probably, as we see in the tragic lives of so many who have contributed along the way,
Mm.
give me this opportunity now. We've seen, hey, you might make $1 billion that way, and you might end up homeless the other way. So this is a difficult situation. But right now, you can look at a person like me, and while I'm still here, I'm still alive, I'm here talking to you.
Very much so.
I didn't get the memo. I went after my passions in life, and somehow I survived. Well, why did I survive? Possibly I survived to be here to talk to you today because I'm in that sweet spot where we can now do this. We can utilize advances in technology. We can utilize, hopefully, AI in the right way and technology and all that to allow people to not have to find something that's profitable and become passionate about that if that's not what they want to do. I mean, of course, we have freedom of choice, so let people
Yeah.
do that. But what about all the people that want to go after their passions? They're probably the vast majority. And here's the great thing. If we can get them to survive and not become broken homeless, in tragic situations, if we can get that to happen, guess what we'll have? We'll have a bunch of people solving our world's problems. We'll have thousands, we'll have maybe millions of people because everyone's passion, I've found in my journey, is extraordinarily beneficial for something or other. It's extraordinarily beneficial to society.
Mm.
So if we involve all 8.4 billion of us, we're going to really attack the bull market in problems that we are sitting on right now.
Yeah. And what I like about
I hope.
Absolutely. And what I like about that perspective is the multitude of perspectives that we're holding inside that 8.4 billion people following their passion, because I think today our biggest challenge as human beings and therefore collectively as organizations or as teams is to learn, unlearn and relearn all the time. And if I come to what you do, improvisation is about letting go, isn't it? It's about letting go of old thoughts or or not being constrained by given thoughts or given ways of playing and being able to do something else, which reminds me of a very recent experience. So I play in an orchestra, and as most people, I've been playing in orchestra for a very long time, classical music, which is nice and it's great, but it's impossible for me to improvise. It's very, very, very difficult. I can't step out of my learned structures, or of course I can, but it's very, very difficult. And, you know, um, we did an orchestration last year for Symphony Orchestra of Tango, as we discussed before the show, like a medley that Chloe Plyford put together for us, changing orchestral pieces, classical pieces into tango. And I remember our orchestra conductor was learning, helping us to learn, unlearn, and relearn, saying, no, 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 it's not like that. Can't you hear it? It's like this. It's a very different rhythm. And, the analogy I always make with that is if I'm a leader in an organization and I lead through command and control, sort of quite structured power over discussion, then tomorrow I need to move to something more empowered, softer, more autonomous. You know, what could it sound like? And what could it feel like? And could I ask you, Rick, to just take that piece of tango medley and change it into jazz for me? And I'm just going to sit here and be completely in awe of your improvisation skills and what lies behind those skills.
Sure. So, what I've been able to do, and I think you were even talking to me before how you saw me in a recent
Yes.
podcast where I took a song by the band Queen, and all of a sudden I was transforming it into a jazz piece. And I realized that, this is something that you can do with almost any song, even though jazz musicians do it supposedly with jazz standards. But those jazz standards were the pop songs of that day. If you go back in time, you'll see that they were the song would come off Broadway, a Broadway show, and everybody would know it. So the jazz musician would take it and record that so that people would be able to crash on it. What I was thinking, I was asking some of our volunteers, I said, listen, this podcast is from France. You guys have any suggestions? And someone suggested a French song. Would that be okay?
That's fine for me.
It's a French song called Autumn Leaves.
Nice.
So you've probably heard it because it's like very, very, but you're going to hear it a very different version
Yeah.
now. And let's see what happens. J'ai une chanson qui nous ressemble. Toi, tu m'aimais et je t'aimais. Nous vivions tous les deux ensemble. Toi qui m'aimais, moi qui t'aimais. Since you went away, the days grow long, and soon I'll hear old winter's song. But I miss you most of all, my darling. When autumn leaves start to fall. Since you went away, the days grow long, and soon I'll hear old winter's song. But I miss you most of all, my darling. When autumn leaves start to fall.
Thank you so much, Rick. That was absolutely fabulous. And so it's brought a completely different energy. And what I really noticed was I recognized some of it, and then I thought it was going to go a certain way, and clearly it didn't. It went into a completely different tone, time, sort of harmony. And I was thinking, wow, I'm constantly surprised. I'm constantly pleasantly surprised. I'm constantly up against what I thought was going to happen. So that's my bias from my classical sort of training, but also just my bias from what I've heard to date in my life experience and what I think is going to happen and what has been formatted into my head for that song, which wasn't exactly what happened at all. So thank you, first of all, for completely blowing away what I thought was going to happen and giving me something completely different to listen to. Thank you for the different energy. And I would be really interested if you could just let us into the secret of what's going on for you behind this process of letting go of what you think you're going to play, what is meant to be played. I mean, what happens there, Rick? Because jazz is rooted in improvisation, which is why I'm so in awe of these people like yourself who can just improvise. So, how do you navigate that process?
Well, one thing you do is it's a twofold thing. Okay, so one part of it is literally immersing your entire life into the study of, of mastery of concepts and harmony and linear things and all kinds of things, all kinds of styles. I mean, I think you heard some Latin, you heard some
Yes.
tango type of stuff in there. Yeah, and again. Well, I'll tell you how that probably happened. So basically, you bring all this, you get this wide ocean of things within your grasp.
Mm,
Then you do the complete opposite when you play, and that is you completely open up a channel to a higher power, and you kind of say, hey, this is too much for me. I'm going to hope that somebody rescues me from the sky or somewhere. And you open something up and you hope that somebody rescues you and the music comes through you
Mm.
and picks whatever it wants from that ocean to
Mm.
deliver for that moment in time. Because you played a part in what I played just now. If you
Yeah.
do it, if you're doing it correctly, you're playing a part in it. The energy of the day is playing a part. This moment in time is,
Mm.
all of these things are playing a part in it. Even maybe a subconsciousness of reaching your listeners, who your listeners
Mm.
are, them, everything. There's all kinds of things in this moment that are
Yeah.
playing, and it can never be repeated. I don't even really know what I did. I won't know until like you said, a month from now or whenever, when this comes out, that's when
Yeah.
I'll really feel, wow, because I really honestly don't know. I go into, but basically, I'm kind of going into a higher consciousness
Yeah.
because what happened recently, and that's what I'm learning from all of you people. I
Mm.
had a guest on my own podcast who was an expert of human consciousness. And I figured I just might as well just throw it out here, right, live on television here, and
Mm.
let this woman, rate it on a level. And she has a lot of the things she has that we are doing in our world that you were talking about with the egos and all this
Mm.
crazy. She has it below 100 on her scale, okay? And it's not even until you get above 200 that you start to get
Yeah.
positive. But she rated a live performance that I did right in front of her eyes 540.
Wow.
So if we are able to throw ourselves up, and again, all these religions, all these things, all these practices, meditation, that's also what they're doing. We're all doing this. Is the tide. This is where we're all tied together. We're all doing it in our own way. We're all trying to raise our level to human
Mm.
consciousness. You can religions that don't get along, they're trying to do the same thing. They
Yeah.
just know it. So here they are fighting each other, but actually they might be it might be one of those situations where hatred is really love with issues.
Mm. I like that. Love with issues. But we get stuck, don't we, in our own frame and what we feel is right or wrong. And I think, this whole thing about what you've just done, I wholly believe in the resonance of systems, okay, the resonance of different fields of energy. And what I learned from playing in an orchestra is that what isn't being played is just as important as what is being played, which comes to your point around resonance and consciousness. And I think if I translate that into my organizational work, listening, deeply listening to your team, but also listening to what isn't being said, which of course is an art. I mean, you spoke about mastery, and I alluded to it before. Music is hard to learn, I think, depending on how you learn it, but the theory of music, the rudiments in the theory of music, it's quite a rigid, deterministic sort of way of learning. It's more like science or maths for me in terms of how one learns it. And you spoke about the mastery of that, and also we're back to this, polarization of the mastery of the linear world or the sort of more rational mind and the mastery of the more creative, intelligent, sort of higher mind. Do you think, Rick, that you can do what you've just done without mastering the more structured, deterministic side of music or not?
Well, just so I don't forget, when you're talking about listening, there was actually a part of my piece where I was kind of imitating leaves falling, right?
I saw that.
And in that section, I think you'll see it's the silence in between the notes that was more
Yes.
important than the notes, because the notes were almost random, but it was the silence and the space that
Mm,
if I was executing that, it would have been an execution of silence and space, because that was the most important thing.
nice.
It's the space that you leave between, and the silence in between each note was more important than the note itself.
Yeah.
So that just to support what you were saying is that you're absolutely correct in that. But now to the other thing, again, I come at this crossroads of a time. So I went to I went to school to study, and I checked piano performance off on a conservatory checklist that offered numerous different styles of music. When I showed up there, I said, okay, I'm so excited. Piano performance. I'm going to play something by Duke Ellington. I'm going to play something by this. I'm going to play something by this. I have some classical music. They said, oh, no, no, no. Because they're the old style.
Yeah.
Only classical music was piano performance to them. That's all. I don't
Wow.
know what the other music was. I guess it wasn't true performance. I have no idea. So I only played classical music, and I was accepted into a only classical department. No one. I was in the classical department at the New England Conservatory, and I was the only person that could improvise at all. None
Yeah,
of them,
I'm not surprised.
nor were they ever, because nobody was going to bring that. You know what I mean?
Take the
No one.
risk.
Yeah, that was just not going to be a part of their curriculum. No one was going to encourage that. They were encouraging them to get ready to hopefully have a job like yours. What instrument do you play?
Cello.
Cello. So hopefully they were, and I noticed the cellos and the violas worked a lot.
Yeah.
You play viola because
No.
not everybody, not you, but I mean, the
Oh,
people.
yeah.
And when I was in school, they were always on call because there were fewer of them because everyone
Yes.
wanted to be a violinist, right, or
Yeah.
something. These
Yeah.
little things I just learned being in the.
I
I was
never understood that.
what?
I never understood wanting to be a violinist. Cello's the best instrument.
Well, cello, yeah. I mean, I noticed that some instruments were on call more than others because less people chose them.
Yeah.
Cello probably more people chose than viola. For whatever
Yeah.
reason, not as many people chose. And the viola people had a lot of gigs because there was a few of them. But
Yeah.
anyway, these are just little things. But so the point is, you don't need per se. I mean, I'm quoted as saying a lot of my jazz playing comes from the University of the Streets. Is that what
Yes.
you're
Yes.
so you learn a lot by studying on your own, listening and talking to others, and you're out there on the streets listening and playing with the other musicians, all that. So there's that secondary type of study.
Mm.
So I'm a product of two ways of study, and I'm much more formally trained than the people in my University of the Streets world. You know what I mean?
Mm. Hmm.
But in the formal world, I'm way more street savvy. You follow me? But
Yeah,
again,
totally.
it's part of a transformation because I see a time when it might be the norm to be the type of musician I am. People might, but see, the problem is being the type of person I am in the old days, you might end up like Mozart,
Mm.
who was, I talk about him in my book. If you want to see and I hope you'll read this. It's a fascinating perspective on Mozart, the
Mm.
foreword to this book, and it's from an artist perspective because he really paid the price for outgrowing the king's fancy or whatever. And
Yes. Yes.
so I mean, he really got in a lot of trouble. But what about this new paradigm where maybe this could be rewarded? Maybe instead of the ending up in the every good deed, no good deed goes unpunished,
Hmm.
you could end up rewarded like the people we're rewarding now for, some say, all the wrong reasons.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because we're back to that balance again of more formatted learning and lived experience. And of course, you can't replace lived experience and the richness it brings to how you do what you do next. And your University of the Streets is so important in terms of being open to other ideas that are not part of your formatting or not part of your original learning, but using them to create something different. And I think what's brilliant about what you do, Rick, is that you're always creating a masterpiece, and it never sounds the same as the last masterpiece, but you're transgressing all types of bias, thoughts, feelings to bring it to a place where that's more inclusive, where everybody can be on an equal level and identify with what you're playing. And if I take that, what's your vision, Rick, for the future of jazz for peace and therefore for humanity, essentially? Because that's the quest, isn't it? To unify humanity.
Well, one of my visions for the future is, and like I said, I'm right on the cusp of this, is not to is to maybe create a society where the person who has his own sound and his own style and is also skilled and all the things like a Mozart, let's say,
Mm,
even like a Charlie Parker in jazz or whatever, is rewarded instead of punished by society. Because if you could not kill them and
Yeah.
ignore them during their lifetime, the Vincent Van Goghs, you know what I mean?
Mm,
If we could do the opposite, what if we
mm,
do the opposite? And how can we do the opposite? Well, we could possibly do the opposite by raising all boats,
mm,
and using technology to do it. See, we needed people to, do these jobs or do these menial jobs. But now they're saying, well, AI and technology is going to replace your job. You're not going to have that job. Well, great. So are you just going to give all that money to Jeff Bezos? He's already got
mm.
millions, right? You're going to give him more. That's like, hey, we got some salt. Let's give it to the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ocean's all set on salt. They're good. Let's take this salt and do something more productive with it than just give it to an ocean that's full of salt anyway. You see what I
Mm.
mean?
Yeah.
So this could be, and then we could have a whole bunch of people that have a resume like mine. If you go to a page called jazzforpeace.wordpress.com/about, if you ever go to that page, we'll have to make it part of the jazzforpeace.org page because I'm talking about it so much. But the reason I talk about it is because it's a page you can go to and you can see what Jazz for Peace has done at 0% funding for world peace and 100% funding for war. What
Mm.
I want to do, what if we do 100% for world peace and maybe 0% for war? Like, what about that? Is that such a
Mm.
problem? But that's a long journey. How about if we just went 1% funding for world peace? 1%, from 0 to 1%, you wouldn't even recognize this world. And we can do it. I'm telling you, we can do it because we can take technology and look, I survived. Maybe other people can survive even better if we utilize technology to give people the opportunity to follow their passions and not end up homeless and starving to
Mm.
death. You see what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah, totally. And it's
End up
and it,
fulfilled.
yes, and it's underpinning the whole tech for good discussion of, using it to create more regenerative models, whether that's social models, economic models, funding models, you know, leveling the playing field through what digital can enable and what technology can bring to us. And I
Yeah, but
think
here's
that's,
another important point. None of these great artists, we all know them in past tense, okay? None of them were heard during their lifetime.
yeah,
The idea that any artist, any great artist that we look up to now, that I've looked up to, was ever heard by even 1% of the world during their lifetime. And I'm saying not even close to 1%. None of them were ever heard during their lifetime by even 1% of the world. And you know what? That's when their biggest impact would have been,
yeah,
had they been heard during their lifetime.
yeah.
Okay. So what if that were to change? Because the artist is up at 540 human consciousness. You know what I
I
mean?
know that's incredible.
Doing something at 540 human consciousness. So that could have a positive impact on other people. It could influence them in a positive way. It might influence some people in a profoundly positive way, which is going to mean that they're going to have an incredible impact on the world with their journey. So what about hearing them in their lifetime? Well, you know what? The verdict is out because here I am with 850 Jazz for Peace concerts, and
Mm,
although I do have to confess I have played in France, and I've recorded in Paris and I've performed in Paris, but I have never brought Jazz for Peace to Paris to raise funds and help an outstanding cause. So something like this would have to take place. You'd have to hear these artists during
mm,
their lifetime when their music would have the biggest impact. A lot of people, if I listen to Mozart now, I can't tell you what notes got the king upset because I wasn't there in that time when he advanced beyond
mm,
everybody. You see what I mean?
mm.
This is the transformation, that this is part of the transformation that
Yeah.
needs to happen. Our species needs to make it, and we can make it. Now, can we screw it up? Yeah, we could. We could get stuck on that old style with the ego and the bombs and all
Mm,
that and just blow each other up. But we or we could come to our senses and say, hey, all of these religions and these studies and these arts and culture, they all have something in common. They all have a common thread, and that is raising human consciousness of our whole species and unite.
mm. And if we can raise human consciousness even by 1%, as you said, the effect would be huge. And
Well,
let's,
raising funding for world peace. Yeah, that's
yes.
what we do. Now,
Yeah.
raising human consciousness, of course. I mean, if we raise, I mean, forget about it. It's unbelievable what it would do. Yeah.
But I think in my head, if you raise human consciousness, you automatically raise the innovation and the will to create different models for funding, for society, for, ways of being and living, let's put it that way. And if we
Automatically.
Yeah, and if we sort of, because time is running, if we keep that as our last point, could I ask you, Rick, if you could leave our listeners, many of whom are leaders and change agents in organizations, big and small, or entrepreneurs, if you could leave them with one message about purpose, creativity, but also the power of one voice, what would it be?
Well, I would like to say, look at what Jazz for Peace has done. We're coming up to the 25th anniversary of it, and we brought Israeli, Palestinian, and Americans together at the United Nations 25 years ago, and had that event of unification been built on, we would have saved trillions of dollars that we don't have access to because it was wasted on war and stuff. I would say, why not decide not to wait 25 years for the solutions that are being offered today and see if we can embrace some of the ideas and solutions that we have come to now from all that we've learned from that journey. Solutions like a trickle up economy for philanthropy and
Mm.
other ideas. Our benefit concert series, bring it to your city or town, or, I mean, contact us so we can bring it to your city or town so that you can see what everyone else on that page sees. And let's all raise, we all have the potential. Let's go for it.
Okay, I'm going to leave our listeners with that call to action of we all have potential to do something, however small it may seem, it will be contributing to the bigger quest. And you've never brought Jazz for Peace to Toulouse, so I'm taking that away as my personal quest. Rick, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your stories and music and your thoughts around leadership. Can you tell me more about where people can find you? You've already given a couple of addresses. Where's the best place to get in contact with you?
Well, info@jazzforpeace.org is a place you can always find us. Just email us with a comment. We consider a comment to be a seedling of an empowerment tree if you're an outstanding cause. And as you can see my name in the bottom there, you can type Rick DellaRatta famous quote into Google, something like that. On YouTube search, you can type Jazz for Peace, easy as ABC, into the YouTube search and get to that. But jazzforpeace.org, rickdellarata.com are, major websites.
Okay, super. And I'm just going to reiterate that call to action of start a movement. All right. Thank you, Rick. Thank you for a great conversation.
My pleasure.